Hey guys, welcome back to some more AFK Arena. Today we're back over on the YouTube account and we are going to be looking at our July tier list. Now we do have a lot of changes in this tier list. Also going to run through the Awakened version of Entendre, where we're really seeing her use, because I know it was a huge question. So let's hop over. I want to break down this tier list because there are quite a few things to change. So let's hop in and we'll take a look at it. So here we go. So this is the tier list. As you can see, the SSS heroes pretty much remain the same, with, of course, starting with Liberta. Liberta is still one of the heroes that is used in every single aspect of AFK Arena. When you look at even the campaign, the Temple Rift, everything, Liberta is there. One of the priority heroes to build up. And of course, when it comes to the Stargazer, the #1 hero to build out of the Stargazer still holds his spot and still holding that place. Now, followed by the Awakened version of Chimera. Now, of course, the Awakened version of Chimera, similar to the Awakened version of Athalia, they are two heroes that are used in every single aspect of AFK Arena, just kind of in a different capacity. When you look at the Awakened version of Athalia, she actually does an incredible amount of damage. She is the best in slot in a lot of different teams and a lot of different content. If you do not have her, you actually end up using a different hero, which is the exact same with that Awakened version of Chimera. If you don't have her, you end up building kind of a different team because, of course, the Awakened version of Chimera is based on HP and also on energy disintegration to really do a lot of the damage that she does possess. Now, then we start looking at Lucilla. She's another one that does incredibly well into a ton of different content. Utility-wise, does and really is super, super strong in a majority of AFK Arena. Then we look at Demia and we have Lavatune. Demia, of course, the really big thing with her is not only the damage that she does, but she has the ability to cheat death, which makes her really important in so many aspects of AFK Arena. And even looking at the heroes that we have within this SS tier, they are the top priority. When you take Demia and you put the artifact on her, you put the Mahira artifact with a skill level 2, your team does not die because it couples well with the ability that she has to actually keep the team alive, which of course means that they can do a lot of damage where the team would regularly be dead. Now, when we look at Lavatune, Lavatune is one of the strongest buffers that we see, especially when you have him built out on the stage. The damage amplification goes through the roof. There is no place really in AFK Arena when you start looking at the multitude of teams that these heroes are not being used at all. Then, of course, the Awakened version of Leica is the one that closes out this SS tier. Now, looking at this, I really want you to take it and think it in perspective. When we start looking at really the S tier, the SS, and the triple S tier, those three tiers comprise about every single hero that we see within AFK Arena that is worth building at this point. You are encompassing all of your meta heroes. You are encompassing all of the different avenues for those meta heroes, meaning that when you start building out and looking at these three tiers, they're going to be a majority of the heroes that work in good synergy together, looking at the support, looking at the mages and the primary damage dealers in there. Now, looking at the SS tier, you'll notice we have Gavis in here. Gavis, of course, plays a lot more of a support role, meaning that the mitigation that he has in there, the way that he works, he is not a damage dealing mage like we've seen with Ainz. Traditionally, a lot of mages like the Awakened version of Belinda are really driven and do an incredible amount of damage. That is not the case with a few other heroes. They are in support and in kind of collaboration with some other heroes. Now, we do have the dimensional hero Amelia in here still. Instant crowd control with energy disintegration. There's not much else you can say because even when you look at other formations where she is present, not only, again, the energy, but also does a very, very high amount of damage. Now, Rimuru is coming in at the SS tier. When we start looking at Rimuru in the entirety and where Rimuru is being used, when you look at the campaign, looking at the Cursed Realm definitely being used, the Treasure Scramble being in the Nightmare Corridor, majority of places this hero is being used in the entirety. Again, very similar to Gavis, we are not seeing Rimuru as a primary damage dealer, but we are seeing Rimuru as a support hero in there and really building out and completing some of these formations. Now, looking at our support heroes, we still have Jerome in here as a buffer. There is very few heroes that buff as much as he does. And a lot of players were also asking, what hero, what support should I build? When you start looking at Jerome, when you look at Ivan, when you look at Palmer, they are the primary really support heroes through so much content in AFK Arena. They are all a priority. And especially with them being kind of in different factions, we have the Greyborn and then, of course, 2 Lightbearers. And of course, looking at a hero like Naruko, they work incredibly well, and they work again in a lot of the meta formations that we see. When you start looking big picture in AFK Arena, they are present through almost everything. Now, the Awakened version of Belinda still holding on to her spot. And of course, again, when you start looking at bigger game modes, the Faction Towers, the Cursed Realm, even looking at the Nightmare Corridor, the Twisted Realm, still being used in all of those capacities, still doing incredibly well. Where we're starting to see her fall off a little bit is the Treasure Scramble, but a lot of players are still using her within the Treasure Scramble just because the tier list that we look at and the utility we look at is under the assumption that you have every single hero built within AFK Arena. Now, when you start looking at a hero like Ivan, again, being used everywhere, same with Palmer, heroes are being utilized in real big utility. Not only the ability to energy regeneration, to shield, to increase the damage that a hero is putting, but also a hero like Palmer that does the crit damage amplification. It is an absolute game changer. Now, when we look at Aethys, that is another one. Crowd control, when you start looking at the Nightmare Corridor, the Twisted Realm, the Cursed Realm does super well. Even Treasure Scramble PvP aspect, the ability to lock down teams does work incredibly well. Now, looking at Rem and Amelia go together a lot of times. When you start looking at this hero, it is pretty much SS in across the tiers. When you look again, looking at kind of the Cursed Realm, the Treasure Scramble, the Nightmare Corridor, this hero is used in a bunch of different places. Really the best in slot for a lot. And of course, if you can get the hero to survive, that is really the big thing. The damage that she does comes from that ultimate ability, but the hero does have to stay alive. Now, of course, looking at our tiny tank, this tank really does it all. When you look at the defensive, when you look at the buffs, when you look at the attack, when you look at having Nadia, works incredibly well in a lot of different content. And then, of course, we talked about Shuna a little bit before. Shuna is a hero that has the utility of a regular support hero, meaning that used in any formations. When, again, you start looking at your Cursed Realm, you start looking at, your Treasure Scramble, you look at the Nightmare Corridor, you look at a multitude of places that these heroes are being used. There is not a formation when you start building out to 5 teams that they are not being used. Now, of course, the Awakened version of Lucius is best in slot damage dealer in a few different formations, which is the reason why we did build him out to that 80 engraving, adding some more stats on there. And of course, with his SP effect, super unique, as you build his defense higher, he actually gets stronger damage-wise because it goes right into the attack, meaning you do have to build him out. And with the Awakened version of Lucius, you do have to build him out to a very high level. So if you're not willing to fully invest, you're not going to see the hero perform as well as you wanted to. Then we get into the Awakened version of Sophia. This is another hero, Cursed Realm, Treasure Scramble, Twisted Realm, Nightmare Corridor does work incredibly well. Maybe not in every iteration is she being used, but a majority of them, she is being used in the entirety. Then, of course, we have Eugene as a damage dealer in the current run that we're doing, is the best in slot for some of the teams in there. Again, looking at the hero, looking at the utility, used in a bunch of different places. The Awakened version of Solus still being used as a very strong support hero. So unfortunately, she was the first support hero that we've seen for the Awakened heroes, followed by Sophia. Now, of course, they do have a place in, again, looking at a couple formations, still being used in a bunch of different places, which is very similar and rings true with the Awakened version of Baden. This is another hero that still does have SS slot effects in the Cursed Realm, the Nightmare Corridor, the Twisted Realm, also the Faction Towers, just absolutely dominating still within a bunch of areas within AFK Arena. And then Trishia, we're starting to see Trishia used a little bit less, but we're actually seeing her in conjunction with some of our other heroes, which of course is very imperative, where she might not be the best damage dealer in there, but she's one of 2 or one of 3 that contribute to really the best in slot team. Now, when we get into the S heroes, these are the heroes that are really, again, important to build when you look at either running a primary formation or being kind of the secondary formation. We have Athel in here as a buffer, as a Celestial, as a damage dealer, still does do incredibly well in a lot of different places, is run in most iterations of the Cursed Realm. Then we look at Adrian and Elise. Now, this is a unique hero, as in we are seeing this hero used in a ton of different content. But the big thing with this hero is it does require a +40 signature item, which a lot of players don't want to build him out to that point. But overall, if you want to, the damage amplification that this hero provides is absolutely huge. Now, when we start looking at Hildwyn, another hero we're seeing a lot of places. When you start looking at the Treasure Scramble is being used, with looking at the Nightmare Corridor is being used, even within the Cursed Realm is being used, more of a defensive. So like we talked similar earlier, when it comes to some of these mages, not doing a lot of damage, which I believe this iteration right now is doing a lot of damage, is the highest damage dealer. But overall, when it comes to the hero and having him built out, has a very, very strong defensive strategy that comes behind him. Then we look at Gwen. Gwen is actually showing right now as some of the best in slot damage dealer within, of course, the Cursed Realm, the Treasure Scramble, and also being within the Nightmare Corridor, is absolutely dominating because of the ability to do damage incredibly, incredibly fast. And when we start looking at Tamaris, another one really solid buffer where if you're looking at some of the heroes in the higher tiers that you might not have built, Tamaris is one that can fill those slots. Now, looking at Scarlet, this is another hero that if you don't have a lot of heroes built within the Cursed Realm, also the Twisted Realm, also the Nightmare Corridor, doing incredibly well because of the burst damage that we possess. Now, falling into the S tier, and the first time that we're seeing, very similar to Rimuru and Shuna, is the Awakened version of Entendre. So right here is the Awakened version of Entendre, falling right into the S tier as it is now, but with that being said, it is a little bit earlier, so she is running best in slot in some of the Twisted Realm combinations, and also Faction Towers absolutely dominating. The other one's kind of a sub. I think it's still too early to tell exactly where she's going to fall, but I feel like she is going to be and is really making some movement for being built. And then, of course, we have Nyla. So this is the third Draconic hero, and really the only 3 Draconic heroes even worth building an AFK arena. The rest of them are really garbage, not being used, which we'll show you. They're much lower down on the tier list. Then we have Kelthin. This is another one that I am surprised by. Kelthin is actually being used in a lot of different places. As a damage dealer, as a sub dealer, we've actually seen Kelthin run a lot with the Awakened version of Baden. When you start putting buffs, Kelthin can actually do a significant amount of damage, but very similar to the Awakened version of Lucius, Kelthin does require a pretty big build out to be built. Then we have Villanelle. Now, Villanelle, of course, this is a hero, energy disintegration, support hero, does work incredibly well, not in the damage aspect, but looking at the Twisted Realm, looking at the Cursed Realm, looking at a couple different places, does incredibly well, and starting to see her again utilized in a lot more places. Still a newer hero to the Mauler faction, but overall, when it comes to utility, it is there. Then, of course, we have Rosaline still holding on, just like we've seen, following Belinda, following a couple other heroes, including Gwen, making sure the ult and really boosting up the attack rating and the ults that we see with these heroes. Ulna still holding on true because, of course, Ulna, when you look at campaign, absolutely dominates. Nightmare Corridor, Twisted Realm, we still see her in a couple different places, but she is starting to lose the footing. Then we have Rain. Rain is in here for the damage amplification that we've seen before, and of course made a big comeback with the Awakened version of Belinda. But as of right now, again, when you look at substitutions within here, not having all of the heroes built, Rain is a very, very good substitution, followed by Lady Simona. Now, Lady Simona, of course, is run with the Awakened version of Shmira, and also does incredibly well damage-wise, depending on the formation that she's being used. Utilization of her is really dependent on exactly, again, who you do have built, but run in the Cursed Realm, run in the Twisted Realm, seeing her actually a couple different places. Then my boy Rowan with his little duck still holding on as a buffer, energy regeneration as a crowd control. Same with Mortis. Again, seeing a lot more of the buffing aspect in there. Silas is the same, very similar to what we have with Rowan and Mortis. Then, of course, we have Orin in here. Orin within the Nightmare Corridor still does incredibly well, still one of the best in slot. Also, when it comes to burst damage, when it comes to team utility, still being used in a couple places. And the same with Matria. Now, Matria is one, of course, that is unique because of the ability to not only do incredibly well in the campaign, but in the faction towers, in the Nightmare Corridor, Twisted Realm, even looking at the PvP aspect, still doing well within the Treasure Scramble. Not used as much as we've seen it in the Hypo team, but is still being used. And then we get into the heroes down in the A tier and really the B tier. So these are the heroes that a majority of players are going to be kind of the one-off. You can see they are some of the older heroes. These are a lot of the heroes that you might see kind of in a niche formation in this A tier, which is really where we do see them. Because even just running through this, and I'm not going to break down every hero in here, but when you start looking at the twins, they are still used in some formations. Even looking at like Olgath, Kanis, and Rook, even currently the Awakened version of Thane built out is the best in slot, but it's only one iteration of the Cursed Realm that we're seeing him really being built. Same with Vika. Vika is being used in one iteration of the Cursed Realm currently. That is, of course, the best in slot. Not a lot of utility outside of their tower play, tower formations. Of course, they are going to be utilized, especially if you do have them built out a little bit. But again, we used to see Mulan as the best in slot, Oden as the best in slot. These, again, are going to be kind of the niche heroes. These are also going to be a lot of the filler heroes that we see within AFK Arena when it comes to the tower formations, or if you don't have the heroes built for the Cursed Realm, the Treasure Scramble, Nightmare Corridor, so on and so forth. These are the heroes that are going to fit the bill in a bunch of different places. Now you'll actually see Milan is right here. So they actually placed him into the B tier. So you can see right there, again, short of the buffs. Now, the thing with this hero specifically is it's super, super early. It hasn't even been released on global. But overall, this hero is being used in conjunction, which unfortunately on the test server, we didn't even see with the Draconic heroes and only with the Draconic heroes. If you're putting this hero in a regular formation, he doesn't have a fourth ability if it's not a Draconic hero. So that is kind of broken to think that this hero doesn't have a place unless it is run with that Draconic hero, which is the reason why, again, kind of dropping down within the tier list. Then, of course, we have Cassius in here. We have Polina in here. Both of them not being used anywhere, unfortunately. And even when you come through here, even looking like a Raku, I believe one-off formation might be being used. I think there was one cursed round formation that he was actually being used, which again is super niche when it comes to building it. Same with the original version of Baden. There's one single formation that he's doing incredibly well in, and I don't like building out heroes for just one single formation, because of course you have to invest in the hero. It has to be high. When it comes to the Cursed Realm, the original version of Baden is broken just kind of based on the build. But again, when you start looking at some of these with the Nightmare Corridor, you'll still see a little bit of one-off niche formations, but not a lot of utility. Even looking at Valkyrie is still being used within the Treasure Scramble, but that is the only place the hero is really being used. Then, of course, the Awakened version of Brutus and a couple other heroes have continued to kind of tumble down the tier list as we get into the end of the third iteration of Awakened heroes and into the fourth iteration. Then we get into some of the C tier heroes. These are heroes that might be used in a tower formation. Most of the time, the answer is going to be no, they're not really used anywhere. And of course, unfortunately, Ainz came in here. We have Lucretia who came in here. The heroes that absolutely used to dominate AFK Arena are no longer being used. And then the very bottom tier is our Walker tier, unfortunately, the D tier, which again, these heroes, not really a place at all within formations, not seeing a lot of utility for any of them at all, but we have so many heroes in AFK Arena. And of course, they are very, very susceptible to the power creep that we see within this game, meaning that even if you look at the first, S tier, the SS tier, and the triple S tier, majority of those heroes are relatively new. Some of the older support heroes still kind of hanging on because they have utility within the tier list, but when you look at your damage dealers, majority of them are the newer heroes to AFK Arena within the tier list, which means they are the priority as we continue to build out those power creep heroes. So, all right, guys, so that is going to do it for July's tier list. Let me know in the comments what you guys think, and as always, thank you guys for watching.